Today I fucked up by rubbing breast milk into an open wound and permanently scarring myself. This happened 5 years ago, soon after I had my first child. I'm not normally one for home remedies or any of that BS. However, I had an old friend come visit to see the new baby. He and his wife talked about giving birth in their living room in an inflatable tub, not vaccinating their kids, and getting whopping cough, and he also talked about the magical properties of breast milk. He drank his wife's breast milk, cooked with it, moisturized the kids with it, and he said that he even used it on cuts to speed up the healing. To be honest, all of this sounded batshit crazy to me at the time. Fast forward a couple weeks, and I'm doing construction on the new baby room. I have a screwdriver in my back pocket along with some screws I need. I quickly reach into my back pocket to get the screws, and the edge of the screwdriver cuts an 8-long gash going from back of my hand past my wrist and along my forearm. This wasn't a very deep wound, so it didn't bleed much. Because of that, I mostly ignored it. The next day, it looked very angry. Now, the smart thing would have been to put some antibiotic ointment on it, bandage it up, or even to maybe go see a doctor. But being an open-minded person, I thought, what if I test the breast milk to see if my friend was onto something or if he's full of it? What's the worst that can happen? So I get an ounce of my wife's breast milk, and rub it into the wound. Then I place some band-aids on it to try to keep the wound closed. That night, I wake up and immediately realize something is wrong. I have a fever, my hand feels like it's on fire, and the wound is weeping like crazy. I go to urgent care the next day, get the wound properly treated. By that point it was swollen open and needed some stitches. I had to take antibiotics. The doctor told me that I'd done everything right to get a severe infection. I created a wound, didn't clean it, allowed it to get infected, and then the breast milk was the perfect growth medium to cultivate the bacteria that was already there, and then closed the wound with band-aids so that the breast milk was trapped in the wound. 5 years on, I have a nasty scar on the back of my hand, forearm that looks like I get into knife fights with street toughs. Moral of the story: modern medicine idiot friends. TLR, breast milk is for infants to drink, not for first aid. Don't trust your hippy-dippy friends. Yeah. You said your friend is the idiot? Hey, my friend said all these batshit crazy medical things. Point 3 or 4 of them in a row. Maybe the 5th one is legit. While sure, it doesn't mean that the other things are false if the previous ones are, and if those were true things it doesn't make the next one more true. But given that you recognize the batshittery, what was your thought process like? Breast milk does carry antibodies that offer some protection, but not for that type of infection. It is full of sugars that bacteria love. People think putting stale urine in their eyes is a good idea. I've spent too much time in mom groups. This doesn't even seem like a weird foo to me. There's so much bad information shared with such conviction amongst new parents. Sorry about the scar. I know someone who was asked by a random neighbor for some of her breast milk to treat an eye infection. She said, sure, and gave them a small pint of slightly heated store-bought milk from the fridge. Today I fucked up by ruining a dying man's last vacation and marriage. I'll preface by saying his own actions were bad, but the circumstances they were exposed and at that specific time in life were my bad. I met a retired high-ranking military member at a hotel I started working at when I was 22. He stayed in one of our bigger rooms, a semi-suite in a back corner, and liked it. We had a nice interaction and he called me later and said he was coming for vacation and wanted that specific room. Hotels don't promise a specific room unless it's the only one of a room type you can reserve, but I made it happen for him. He'd come to town on business and call and ask for that room and I'd make it work. He started coming for vacation and ask for it and stay for a week once or twice a year. I met his wife, we talked a lot, I'd hook them up with good reservations at restaurants, he'd tip me well, and generally was awesome. We got to know each other well. I learned he had been exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam and had some serious health issues. He was also probably early 70s when I met him. His wife was also an older lady that was lovely. Eventually he told me he had Parkinson's and long-term leukemia and things were only going to get worse. For 14 years he called me every so often and came back for vacation with his wife. I set up his room and various preferences. We'd chat while he was there and he'd slide me like $100 for making it all work. Sometime in there I didn't see him for a couple years. I figured he passed away or was in bad health and would just be another hotel regular that disappeared. It happens. Job stops traveling there. Corporate changes, hotel contacts, and people you knew pretty well for years just gone. One day I get a call from his wife. He's deteriorated a lot and doctors don't think he has long. She wants me to set up one last vacation and he said I knew everything he preferred. I tell her, of course, I've set this up for years. No need to worry, I'll make sure everything is exactly what he likes. I tell her I look forward to seeing her again after so long. There is a kind of awkward silence and she thanks me and hangs up. A couple minutes later she calls me back. What do you mean about seeing me again? I've never been there? Dead awkward silence as I piece together what she just said versus years of knowing this man and his wife. Confused because who goes on vacation a couple weeks a year without their wife? These people are also super old. I'm sorry, I must have misspoken or remembered. It's been a long time since he's been here, tell me why you think you know me? I deflected as much as I could but she 100% knew because I was so specific about what he liked. She called me several times after that and I tried to play it off but she knew. Comes day of vacation, my dying friend shows up with a woman I do not know. Checking into the hotel I just happened to be at the front desk helping even though by that point I was a manager. In front of the whole lobby, it's nice to meet you. I'm his actual wife, not that whore you knew for years. The dying guy looked like he was ready to be done right there. How he looked at me was so sad. He knew I looked up to him, and suddenly was in the middle of his mess, how I must see him. On his last vacation, dying, with his wife hating him. It is his fault for doing that, but also mine for overstating, which we know not to do. Was a mess. Too long did not read. Knew an older man and his wife for 14 years who turned out to not be his wife and accidentally told his real wife setting up their last vacation. Being a veteran is not an excuse to do bad things after you leave service. It's not your fault it's the veterans for cheating and hoping it wouldn't impact him. Dude fucked up by not sliding you extra Benjamins to keep you in the loop? You were his guy, oh well. You did your job well, he just didn't do husbanding well. Did he still have a good holiday and slip you $100? Not your fuck up. Overstating something in person would be a fuck up, but not over the phone when you are reasonably certain who you're speaking with. Would you have used more discretion in this situation if the man had made you aware of his affair all those years? If your answer is, yes, then the fuck-up is all his. No, you didn't ruin his marriage, he did. Who you thought was his wife wasn't, and honestly he never told you otherwise. Also maybe this was a way for his conscience to be clear but didn't have the heart to tell her himself. The policy not to overstate is, like sure don't be a snitch, but if he introduces a woman as his wife and you guys bond over years, he should probably have done literally anything to be smarter about how he was going about things. Or, also, not be a cheater for a decade. We don't get to pick our deaths most of the time, but he could have picked a more meaningful life. Sucks to be him while the two worst case scenarios overlap. Today I fucked up by flirting with the substitute teacher in high school as a joke. Throwaway account for obvious reasons. Today I had a substitute teacher for English class. As an icebreaker, not sure why they do it. She had us share our answers on, if you could go forward, backward in time, where would you go and why? She was going through each student in the class for attendance and for some reasons I was really firm on my answer. I rehearsed in my mind for 100 times until it was my turn. I would go forward in time to when you fall in love with me, which should be in around 1 second. Dead silence and the teacher gave an awkward response. I had no idea what flashed across my mind before I decided to say this, and it was extremely inappropriate of me to say that. Too long did not read. Flirted with the teacher as a joke and no one laughed. Also I went to bed at 4 a.m. the night before and had 2 caffeine pills, 400 milligrams, 12 hours before school. Probably explains why. I learned the phrase, core cringe memory, on Reddit recently. I think this is one of yours. 20 years from now as you lie in bed next to your wife. Just as you're about to fall asleep. Your brain will be all like, hey, remember that time you flirted with the teacher? And you will lie awake reliving it. More cringe than anything, you'll be okay, we all flop sometime. If you still cringe when you think about it, keep in mind that others will most likely remember exactly what you did. And will never ever forget, reminding you every day of what you did for the rest of your life. Classic on paper, weird in person. I laughed, have a point up. I guess you were learning about sexual harassment early. This was the moment you realized you had a knack for writing romantic comedies. You nailed the terrible first impression part. Now write the elaborate success and failure route the hero must go on to finally find out his true love was his nerdy best friend giving him advice all along.